The Galactic Empire had always prided itself on its unparalleled military strength. The very race they encountered across the stars had been swiftly dominated, brought to their knees before the might of their vast fleets and advanced technology. Admiral Veron, in particular, had built a reputation as a relentless conqueror. A man who brooked new position, his victories were well known, his reputation uncontested. He had spent years rushing rebellion and expanding the borders of the Empire, often with as much certainty that no species could match the Empire's power. As Vincent in the bridge of his flagship, the Imperial Wrath, he received a report of an unknown fleet drifting into the Empire's restricted space. His officers were quick to label them as either pirates or a rogue civilization, unaware of where they had ventured. The Empire's intelligence had no record of the ships, which piqued Vaughn's curiosity. However, to him it didn't matter who they were, any trespasser would be taught the same lesson. Veron barely glanced at the display screen showing the unknown ship. They don't even have an escort, he muttered, his voice thick. If disdain one squadron should suffice, the Empire painted a picture of a small convoy of ships, their size and design. Nothing remarkable, they seemed to be exploratory vessels not built for combat. Vaughn, this was nothing more than an exercise in demonstrating his authority. His subordinates stood ready, waiting for the inevitable command. Move us closer, let's show them what they're dealing with. The fleet advanced V's flagship, leading the charge. The other officers shared their admiral's confidence, already visualizing the swift defeat of the intrude. As they approached, Vaughn opened a channel, his voice amplified across space. To reach the foreign ship, you're trespassing in Galactic Empire space. Power down your vessels and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be met with immediate destruction. There was no response. Veron expected as much. He had delivered similar ultimatums countless times before, and while many alien species were quick to submit, a few ways tried to test their strength against the Empire. It never ended well. For the minutes passed, and still no reply. Vaughn's patience began to thin. Hegel, Ansidathus communications officer, but the officer shook his head, indicating there was still no response from the unidentified fleet. Vaughn leaned forward, his gaze narrowing at the display. Perhaps they need a demonstration. He gave a nod to his weapons officer. A warning shot was fired, a calculated strike aimed at a point just ahead of the lead vessel in the human conv. The laser blast seared through the empty space, but to Vaughn's surprise, the alien ships didn't even flinch. They didn't scatter. They didn't retreat. They didn't even power up their weapons in defenses. They seemed to remain on course, as if completely unbothered by the Empire's show of force. Vaughn clenched his jaw. Where they ignoring us? The sensors revealed something strange. Instead of taking evasive maneuvers, the unknown ships appeared to be emitting a series of weak energy signals, almost like an old-style radio transmission. His officers scrambled to interpret it, and within moments the translation was displayed on the Admiral's screen. That the best you've got. Van Blink, he had never been spoken to like this by a supposed enemy. The tone was mocking, casual as thought. The Empire's weapons were mere toys. Anger flared inside him. But before he could issue another command, the message continued. Do yourselves a favor and turn around. You're not equipped for this. For a moment, there was stunned silence on the bridge. Vaughn could hardly believe what he was reading. His officers exchanged confused glances, uncertain of how to proceed. Was this some kind of bluff? None had ever dared to mock the Empire's military in such a brazen manner. Vaughn's hands curled into fists. She had no patience for insolence, especially from a group of ships that seemed so insignificant. Full assault, the ordered. Let's see them laugh this off. The Empire's fleet surged forward. Weapons, blazing lasers, missiles, and plasma cannons filled the space. Between them and the human ship, to Vaughn's horror, the enemy vessels reacted in ways she hadn't anticipated. The moment the barrage hit, the ships vanished from the scanners. They've disappeared. One of the officers stammered. Cloaking technology. Venspath had heard of it, but never had he seen it used so effectively. The Empire had its own stealth systems, but they were primitive compared to what he was now witnessing. The unknown ships had simply vanished, without a trace, evading the full brunt of the Empire's attack. With ease, Van's heart began to pound. Ordered his fleet to fire in all directions, hopping to catch the ships as they reappeared. Every shot seemed to land in empty space. The human fleet danced around the Empire's barrage, their movements fluid and unpredictable. Whenever one of the ships reappeared for a brief second, it was only to mock them, further gliding through the chaos, as if it were nothing more than a light show. The Admiral's frustration turned to fury. Where are they? They toying with us? Cerrone of his subordinates whispered in disbelief. Varon gritted his teeth. This is impossible. No fleet could have such agility, such perfect coordination. The humans mean, while continued to broadcast their messages. You might want to stop shooting before this gets embarrassing. Vaughn had never felt embarrassment in his entire career. Either he was his fleet, a symbol of the Empire's power, being made a fool of by a handful of ships that he had written off as insignificant desperation. Path him, he was Admiral von Conqueror or of Systems, Breaker of Empire. She would not be humiliated by these upstart. All units prepare the graviton cannons, von Bark. I don't care if they cloak. I radiate full power across the entire sector. As the massive graviton weapons charged, Vaughn felt a brief sense of satisfaction. These weapons could disrupt event the most. Advanced cloaking field, nothing could hide from the sheer gravitational pull. They created the moment. Cannons fired, the surrounding space rippled with distorted energy for a moment. Vaughn believed he had them, but once the energy subsided, the human ships reappeared completely unharmed. A new message flickered across his screen. Nestri, but we warned, Yuvin stared in disbelief. His fleet, this ultimate weapon, had failed. Admiral Varon's fury had reached its boiling point. The Empire's finest weapons capable of wiping out entire fleets had done nothing. Against the human ships his bride built over years of undefeated campaigns was taking blow after blow. His officers stood in tense silence, unsure of how to proceed, afraid to speak out in fear of Vaughn's wrath. Is this some kind of joke? Vaughn growled, pacing across the bridge of his flagship. Are we seriously being mocked by a handful of civilian ships? She slammed his fist down on the console, glaring at the screen, where the human ships continued to float seemingly unbothered by the Empire's full arsenal. Every conventional strategy Varank knew had failed their advanced Kel. Oaking technology, combined with shields that were apparently impenetrable, left his fleet with no option but to resort to desperation. Yet event the graviton cannons, his final ace, had been brushed off. As if they were nothing more than a passing breeze. Give me an update, Vaughn demanded, his voice sharp and laced with frustration. The sensors saw Pfizer nervously scan the data, shaking his head in disbelief. Sir, the targets remain in scath. Their shields show no signs of damage. It's as if 4 weapons never even touched them. Ven's temper flared, but forced himself to rem. Aining control, losing his composure in front of his crew would only deepen the humiliation. He had to stay focused to think of a way to turn the situation around. He wasn't about to let some unknown species make a mockery of him. And the Empire deploy the fighters, Van ordered, his stone ice cold. Swarm them from all angles. As if their ships are too nimble for our main cannon. So we'll overwhelm them with numbers. Within moments, hundreds of fighter craft launched from the Empire's fleet, forming a massive cloud of sleek vessels shirtling towards the human convoy. The plan was simple: outnumber Theme Gauge in close quarters combat and find a way to penetrate their defenses. No cloaking device or shield could protect against that many attacks or so. Vaughn thought as the fighters closed in, the humans remained Irving calm. Vaughn squinted at the screen, waiting for the inevitable clash, confident that this time he would break through. But the human ships didn't react in the way he expected. Instead of trying to evade or fight back, they seemed to accelerate forward directly towards the fighters. What are they doing? Vaughn muttered, his brow furrowing in confusion. Are they trying to ram them? But then something even stranger happened. The human ships once again flickered out of sight, the cloaking technology activated in perfect unison, and within seconds the vast cloud of fighters found themselves without a target. The pilots scrambled, firing their weapons in all directions, but it was futile. The humans had simply vanished. Vaughn's frustration turned into disbelief. Impossible. The communications officer looked up from his station, face pale. Sir, receiving another message from the human fleet on screen. Vaughn B. message appeared in front of him. The tone as casual and mocking as before. Nice try, but we've been through this before. You really need to update your tactics. The bridge was silent. Ven's officers exchanged worried glances, realizing just how dire the situation had become. The Empire, with all its power, was being outclassed every turn, and now they were being openly taunted. They're toying with the son of the junior officers, muttered under his breath. But Vaughn heard him quiet. Vaughn snapped, thought the truth in the officer's words. No death him, he knew it. The humans weren't even taking the battle seriously. They were playing a game, and Vaughn was nothing more than their unwilling participant. They're making fools of us. Vaughn said, more to himself than anyone else, but they couldn't afford to be humiliated like this. His pride, his career, the Empire's reputation, everything was on the line. He needed a victory, something, anything. Prepare the fleet for full power. Vaughn commanded every weapon system, every cannon, every missile. I don't care if we have to destroy every ship, we have to get this done. They won't walk away from this, enscathed as the fleet powered up for a final allowed assault. Vaughn felt a flicker of satisfaction. The humans might be clever, but no species could survive the sheer firepower of an entire Imperial armada. A8 maximum output. The Empire's strength had always been in its ability to overwhelm and crush its opponents with brute force. The weapons officer hesitated, looking uncertain. But sir, if we fire at full capacity, we risk damaging. I don't care, Vern interrupted. I'll take full responsibility. Fire everything we have. The order was carried out. Hundreds of missiles, laser beams, and plasma cannons were unleashed in a massive wave of destruction, aimed at very possible trajectory where the human ships might be hiding. The space around them lit up with violent energy. As the weapons tore through the void for a moment, it seemed like the humans would have nowhere to run, but then just as quickly as the barrage began. The scanners showed something astonishing. There gone the sensor officers, Ed, his voice barely above a whisper. Von Key's widened. What do you mean, gun? They've completely vanished, sir. Not cloaked, not fitting. They're just not there anymore. Von stared at the screen, feeling a cold chill crawl up his spine. The entire human fleet had simply disappeared, leaving behind not trace of their presence. The Empire's full force had hit nothing but empty space. Another message appeared on the screen, short and to the point. Was that supposed to scare you? So you might want to rethink your approach. Vonk's face turned a deep shade of red as the realization of his failures. Ankin the human had not only avoided his attack, but Hanzo, without even breaking his wet everything he threw at them had been for nothing. He slumped back into his chair, feeling the weight of defeat settling on his shoulders. His entire fleet, the pride of the Empire, had been outmaneuvered, outclassed, and humiliated by a small group of ships that had never even fired a shot in return. Von's mind raced, searching for some way to salvage the situation. He had never experienced defeat like this. How could he return to the Empire with this disgrace hanging over him? How could he face his superiors knowing that he had been bested by a force he had so arrogantly underestimated? But more than anything, Von was left with one question: who were these humans? Admiral Ven sat in stunned silence, his mind reeling from the series of humiliating events that had unfolded. The realization that the humans had not only evaded every attack, but had done so with a kind of effortless grace. Not at him. He had seen defeat before, but nothing like this. There was no strew Law drawn-out battle, just utter domination, and not a single human ship had been touched. He knew that retreat wasn't an option. If he returned to the Empire with news of such a colossal failure, his career would be finished. But staying here facing down an enemy that was clearly toying with him wasn't much better. Von clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms as she considered his options. The human had disappeared again, but they knew they were still there, watching, waiting before he could issue any new orders. A notification popped up on the display. Another transmission from the human fleet. Von's jaw tightened. A Sherad, the messages still here, ready to take this seriously. Yet the taunt was infuriating. He felt like a child being scolded by an Eldarin, and it burned at this pride. But Tulsa made one thing abundantly clear: the humans were giving him a choice. They could have annihilated his fleet by now if they wanted to. That much was obvious, yet they hadn't. This wasn't just about warfare. They were sending aim sage, and it was up to Venta to decide whether to head it or ignore it. He slammed his fist against the arm of his chair. Enough off this. Cerrone of his officers asked cautiously, prepare a strike team. Von growled, webboarding one of their ships. Let's see how clever they are when we have their technology in our hands. There was a pause on the bridge. As the officers processed the order, it was a bold move, perhaps reckless, but Von had run out of options. As if he could get inside one of the human vessels, extract information on their technology, he could turn the tide. The element of surprise would be on his side. The humans wouldn't expect a direct boarding attempt. The boarding team prepared quickly. Fitted with the Empire's best close combat weapons and armor, they launched in a fast-moving shuttle, cloaked and headed straight for one of the human ship. As the shuttle raced toward its target, Von watched intently. His breath held. The human had been elusive Savar, but now he was taking the fight directly to the mat. First, it seemed like the plan might work. The shuttle approached the human ship undetected, and the Empire's Marines were ready for what they thought would be a quick, decisive strike. But then, just as they were about to make contact, the human ship shimmered, and the shuttle was stopped dead in its tracks. The humans had disabled it without firing a single shot. Ven's heart sank. The Marines were stranded, floating helplessly in space, their shuttle systems offline. He cursed under his breath, knowing that the humans had anticipated this move as well. Another failure, another blow to his already fragile pride. Before he could even attempt to recall the boarding team, the human ships reappeared, this time surrounding his capital ship one by one, the uncloaked revealing their sleek, almost minimalist designs, their surfaces gleaming with the light from the nearby stars. So it was the first time Von had seen them up close, and the sight left him speechless. The rewas a calmness to their approach, a confidence that was unsettling. The bridge was deathly silent as the humans slowly, methodically disabled the Empire's warships. They didn't destroy them. Instead, they targeted specific systems, engines, weapons, shields, leaving the ships dead in space, but otherwise unharmed. The precision of the attacks was terrifying. Von had never seen anything like it. The humans knew exactly where to strike, rendering his fleet useless with surgical accuracy. The capital ship systems flickered as the human fleet disabled its defense. As Von watched helplessly as his pride and joy, the Imperial wrath was reduced to little more than a floating husk. His crew looked to him for orders, but it had none. The first time in his career, he was completely powerless. A final message appeared on the screen. This one was different from the others. There was no mockery. Note on it was simple, direct. We could have destroyed you. But we didn't let that sink in. Vin's chest tightened as she read the words. The implications were clear. The humans were far beyond anything the Empire could handle. They had chosen to show our restraint, but had didn't meant they would always be so merciful. The message was a warning, a final chance for Vaughn to walk away and save whatever remained of his fleet and his dignity. But Varen wasn't he to give in. His pride wouldn't allow it. His hands shook as he stood from his chair, glaring at the screen. As if his defiance could change the outcome, he had faced countless enemies in the past, and each one had fallen before him. Why should this time be any different? Yet deep down, he knew, he could feel it in the pit of his stomach. The humans weren't like the others. They didn't operate on the same rules of war that the Empire had followed for centuries. They were playing a different game, one that Vaughn didn't fully understand, and that scared him more than anything. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of his communications officer clearing his throats. "For what are your orders?" Ven stood there, frozen, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He wanted to fight back, to prove that the Empire was still the dominant force in the galaxy. But the truth was staring him in the face. The humans had given him a chance to retreat and save his fleet from total destruction. It was a rare moment of mercy, and Varan knew that if he pushed any further, the next encounter wouldn't end the same way. With a heavy sigh, Vaughn finally spoke. "Recall, the strike team were treating." The words felt foreign on his tongue, bitter and hard to swallow, but there was another option. Continuing this fight would only result into total annihilation, and Vaughn wasn't ready to sacrifice everything for the sake of his pride. As the fleet slowly began to, the human ships remained information, watching silently as the Empire's warships limped away. They didn't pursue, didn't attack. The battle was over, and the humans had won without ever needing to fire a killing shot. Vaughn sat back down, his eyes fixed on the display. As his fleet retreated, he had been outclassed, outmaneuvered, and utterly defeated. But the worst part wasn't the loss itself. It was the knowledge that the humans had chosen to let him go, that they could have destroyed him at any moment, but decided not to. The message lingered in his mind long after the humans had disappeared from sight. They could have destroyed you, but they didn't. Asterisk. Admiral Varen stared blankly at the screen as his fleet limped away, the shadow of his former arrogance weighing ingeevily on his mind. His hands rested on the armrests of his chair, but they felt numb, disconnected from the reality of his situation. Their retreat was in motion, but every inch of distance put between him and the human fleet only deepened the pity in his stomach. He had never known defeat, never felt the sting of humiliation so acutely. Yet there he was, fleeing from a fight that had been one side from the beginning. The bridge was silent. To every officer afraid to speak, to even breathe too loudly, as thought they might trigger Vaughn's wrath. But it wasn't angry anymore. He was tight. That silence is something even more powerful than rage was settling over him. Fear, not fear of death or destruction, but a fear of what this encounter meant for the future of the Galactic Empire. The humans hadn't fought them, not really. They hadn't needed to. Everything Vaughn had thrown at them had been brushed aside with an ease that was terrifying. The Empire, with all its power, all its might, had been nothing more than a joke to them. He had faced opponents before, yes, enemies who were brave or reckless enough to challenge the Empire, but never had he encountered an enemy like this one that didn't even need to show their full strength. As the fleet drifted farther into the safety of Emperor controlled space, Vaughn's thoughts turned to the message the humans had left him with. It was a message that felt more like a verdict than a warning. "We could have destroyed you, but we didn't." That sentence played on a loop in his mind, haunting him, stripping away the last remnants of his confidence. He was supposed to be the best. Admiral Vaughn, undefeated, unyielding, the Empire's hammer, but now he was the man who had been humiliated by a small convoy of ships that hadn't even broken his weth. Didn't know what stung more, the defeat or the fact that they hadn't seen him as enough of athlete to even consider wiping him out. They'd let them go. And the worst part was that it hadn't been an act of mercy. No, it was something much more calculated, something more deliberate. The humans had made a statement. Vaughn couldn't help but wonder what that statement meant for the Empire. He had seen countless civilizations fall under the Empire's might, their leaders trembling at the thought of resistance. They had all been crushed one by one, until the Empire was the undisputed ruler of vast portions of the galaxy. But now there was something new on the horizon, something that could challenge the Empire in ways it had never been challenged before. The human fleet was not just technologically superior. They were something else, and entirely. They possessed a calmness, a confidence that Ved never seen. It was as if they knew they were untouchable. No amount of brute force could overpower them. They had outthought them, outmaneuvered him, and worst of all, they had done it without breaking As wet it was a sobering realization, one that made Veron feel small and insignificant in a galaxy that had always belonged to him. He wondered, read what would happen when word got back to the Emperor. What would the Empire do in response? They couldn't ignore this. They couldn't pretend it hadn't happened. But Vera knew that the Empire's typical approach, more force, more power, more destruction, wouldn't work this time. The humans weren't like their previous enemies. They didn't play by the same rules. And that terrified him more than he cared to admit. The comms officer finally broke the silence, his voice. "He's it, sir. What should we report to the Emperor?" Vaughn didn't respond right away. His eyes were locked on the display, watching as the stars passed by each one, a reminder of how small his fleet now felt in the vastness of space. What should he report? The truth: he had been beaten without even putting up a fight, that the Empire's greatest weapon had been but a joke to these humans for the first time in his career. Vaughn didn't know what to say. How could he explain this defeat without damaging himself and the Empire in the process? But then again, Liang wouldn't help. Sooner or later, the Empire would cross paths with the humans again, and next time the humans might not be some. Ursuful, tell them. Vonk's voice wavered, then regained some of its old strength. Tell them we encountered an unknown force, one that is far beyond anything we've ever seen. They didn't destroy us because they didn't need to, but make no mistake, they could have. The officer nodded, though the weight of those words seemed to hang heavy in the air, then slumped back in his chair, letting out of breath. Head didn't realize he had been holding. He had always been a proud man, but pride wouldn't save him. Now pride wouldn't save the Empire from what was coming. Head didn't know what the future held. But one thing was certain. The days of the Empire's unchallenged dominance were over. As the fleet continued its slow retreat, Vin's thought turned to the future. The humans had shown their hand, but only a fraction of it. What other secrets did they hold? What other weapons, technologies, and strategies were waiting in the wings? If they'd wanted, they could have crippled the entire Empire fleet, and yet they had held back. Why? Vaughn didn't know, but he had a sinking feeling that the humans had their own agenda. They were not conquerors like the Empire. They were something different, something more dangerous. They didn't fight for territory or resources. They fought for something far more powerful, something Vaughn hadn't been able to grasp. By this failure today had made one thing abundantly clear: the Empire could no longer afford to underestimate this new force in the galaxy. The humans were no longer an unknown variable. They were a threat unlike any the Empire had ever faced. Vaughn closed his eyes. The weight of the encounter pressing down on him. Hadn't know what would come next, but for the first time in his life, he felt the stirrings of doubt. Doubt in the Empire's ability to hold on to its power. Doubt in his own capability as a leader, and whether or not the galaxy would ever be the same again. The humans had laughed off the Empire's might, and in doing so they had revealed a terrifying truth. The Galactic Empire was no longer the most powerful force in the galaxy. It was just another player facing an enemy that didn't even consider it a challenge.